Bore da, that's Welsh for hello, good day. And the reason I'm speaking that little tiny bit of Welsh is because here I am in Carnarvonshire in Wales. It's a bit rainy today, but I've got something spectacular to show you because we're about to meet the owners of Gwydir Castle. And we have met them before, actually, Peter and Judy, at the very beginning of Viking.TV, when I had to interview everybody remotely from my house in Oxfordshire. Here they were, sitting in their castle in Carnarvonshire. But they've invited me back to come see for myself what a spectacular place this is. So come along with me. In this episode, we'll meet the peacock families who've been breeding here since 1828, to the spooky ghost room upstairs, said to be haunted by human ancestors, from an entire panelled room which had to be recovered from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, to the beautiful parlour which once looked like this, but now is totally missing its magnificent oak panelling, thought to be lost somewhere in America and still being hunted. From the castle's iconic Tudor chimneys, the first major repair job because they were wobbling atop a fragile roof, to a new hazard, flooding in the modern day. It has never, in centuries, happened before, but now it's a nightmare, threatening a dream. Judy and Peter have spent the last 30 years learning to see every setback as a challenge and a vocation. Peter and Judy, last time we met, it was remotely, and it's just wonderful to meet you in person, but to see this place is an absolute knockout. You are clearly very proud of it.
Bless you. Well, that's very kind. It's lovely to see you as well, rather than remotely. Yeah. In the flesh. And in the full diamond.
Yeah, but this isn't about me. This is about Gwydir Castle, which is, I don't know what I expected, but this is like walking back into history. And you are very proud of that, aren't you?
We've worked very hard, I think. As you know, it's been a huge restoration for us, and we've been at this now for 30 years. And there have been many challenges and many adventures along the way. And when we took it on, it was full of horses and chickens living in these rooms. There was water pouring in through the ceiling. So it's been a huge job of restoration. And yes, I think we've worked very hard to try and keep that atmosphere, which, as you've expressed, it's almost tangible. When you walk into these rooms, it hits you, really, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And we are passionate about history, always have been. That's why we're here, I think, really, because Gwydir presented a challenge, a problem, but also a wonderful opportunity. And so when we came here, we were in our 20s at the time, we were fueled with that kind of naivety of youth still, I think, probably. But also that burning interest in history and just being part of Gwydir's journey.
Well, it is a 30-year journey now, because you're adding to its history.
It makes one very humble to think of that we're part of that layering.
Oh, tell me about, you were telling me about a while ago, how different the place actually feels now that it's had 30 years of love invested in it.
Well, when we took it on, it was really sad. It was sad and gloomy and grumpy and very neglected. It was ruinous. There was, as I say, there was water pouring in through these ceilings, and it was just damp and it was unhappy. It was, but I think 30 years on, I think we've kind of earned our stripes. The house perhaps thinks that, and it's changed. It's so changed, and I think it's sort of blossomed.
Is it a happier house?
It's a much happier house. It's a very smiley house. It's a lovely place to be.
And it's got a wonderful atmosphere now too. It's got that sense of history really sort of shines out of it. And I think we've always had a very close relationship with the house from the beginning.
Yeah, but I don't know why. And you must have had people around you who must have said, "You're mad. Look at it. I mean, it's a wreck."
Everybody said it.
You told me the story about how you stumbled across it, really, but something about it called out to you.
Well, we were actually looking for a cottage to buy, I have to say. We were looking for a cottage to buy, but we wanted something that had some kind of historical integrity. We wanted to, because we're both passionate about history and heritage. But we had no money, and we just hopped over the gate one afternoon and saw Gwydir and instantly fell in love with it. I mean, who wouldn't? But we were really so worried about its future. And it was back in the days, 1994 when we bought it. Nobody wanted houses like this.
It was very much a problem house. I mean, it was full of livestock, and I mean, there were 2 horses in here, and there were chickens.
Nature takes over a place that's been derelict.
I remember the first time we lit that fire, there was an explosion, and we thought, gosh, there were sort of firecrackers or something. It was eggs. Chicken had laid eggs in the fire. Anyway, I mean, it was in a lot of trouble, and it was completely mantled as well, with every form of ivy and creeper and everything. So you couldn't really read the house particularly. The frequency inside was something that was still very tangible. But as Judy says, it was grumpy and wet and had a dark atmosphere. But under all that, somewhere you could tell there was this lovely frequency of earliness. And once we started stripping all the ivy and the creeper and everything else off to try and have a look at the lamentable condition of what remained of the roofs and the absent leads and all that sort of thing, we started making extraordinary discoveries. There's a wonderful, seriously important Elizabethan arch in the garden. And we had no idea it was there. It was just this blob of ivy. And it's Sir John Wynne's arch, which is about 1590. These kinds of discoveries, the more you sort of strip away, and the garden, certainly in the first few years, it was all chainsaw gardening to try and recover the
what's
element
underneath
and the structure. Exactly. And anyway, all of that was part of the excitement. It still is part of the excitement. We're still finding things.
So what is its history? How far does it go back?
Gosh, well, I mean, there's been something on the site here since practically the Dark Ages, because this was the first crossing point of the river. So strategically, it was an important site. But this hall that we're sitting in dates from about 1420.
So is this the oldest?
This is the oldest part of the house, and it was originally an open great hall. And then, like every ancient house, such as Gwydir, things have been bolted onto it every 50 years since that first building date, really.
Yeah. So is it? It's called Gwydir Castle. Is it a massive country house, or is it a castle? What makes a castle a castle?
Well, it's more of a fortified manor house. Really.
A maison forte,
yes.
as the French would say.
Yes, a little fort.
It was much more muscular in the late Middle Ages, and there was a moat and stout gates and walls and all the rest of it. And its earliest references are as Castell Gwydir, or Gwydir Castle. And increasingly, as it goes on through time, through the 16th century, it starts to acquire bigger windows. They start to make it more light and turn it more into a sort of country house. So I think it was much more martial. If you were here in sort of 1490, it would have been very much a sort of place. And by 1590, it was very much more a place.
And by 2025, it is... I can't even think of the right word. It is imposing, but it takes you right back into history, and you want to find out about the people who lived here and whether they still are around somewhere, and you can almost see them disappearing round corners.
And I think that for us is when history becomes really interesting, when you can connect, there's a wonderful door upstairs that dates from about 1520, and when you can think of the people we know who lived here in 1520, so we know, who touched that door, and it's our way almost of, I can touch that door and I think of Catherine of Berain, who's a great Welsh character, and I think of her, I can touch that door and almost hold hands with her down through the centuries.
Cousin of Queen Elizabeth. And so, when we're...
She was a cousin of Queen Elizabeth I.
Yeah. When you can connect the thing with the person. Yeah. It's a story that's in progress and still in progress in a sense. And that's very exciting to us, I think.
And there's lots of early documentation. We know more about what's going on here in the 16th and 17th centuries than we do in the 19th. There's lots of letters and deeds and wills and all the exciting stuff that happened at that time, gunpowder plot and Babington plot, Spanish Armada,
what's the
whatever.
Link to the gunpowder plot?
Oh, there are all sorts. Well, Sir John Wynne was one of the very few people who knew about it beforehand, and he did two things. He not only didn't attend Parliament, which he's supposed to do as MP of Carnarvon at the time, Carnarvonshire, but he also didn't tell anyone about it. So
just to remind our audience about the gunpowder plot, this was the attempt by Guy Fawkes and others to blow up Parliament.
Exactly, in 1605.
Kill the king.
And it was a Catholic conspiracy, a Catholic plot. There's a lot of evidence that Sir John Wynne was the kind of Protestant conforming head of a large extended family, of which many were Old Faith, many were Catholic. In fact, his brother-in-law was hanged, drawn and quartered as a consequence of the Babington plot in 1586. His son died a Catholic in Lucca, Sir John Wynne Jr. in 1614. Once you start joining up the dots, It probably explains the fact that we have a double priesthide here as well.
A double priesthide now. Can you explain that?
Well, from about 1586 onwards, it becomes high treason to have a Catholic priest in your house. There are various attempts made on Queen Elizabeth's life, and she's excommunicated in 1570 by the Pope. This becomes a real problem, and increasingly by the end of the century, the oppression of the Catholics still adhering to the old faith becomes a problem. And there are lots of people who are after them. Francis Walsingham, who's the spy master general of Queen Elizabeth, if you like, the kind of head of MI5 and MI6, is pursuing Catholics. And one of the laws that comes in is if a Catholic priest is found in your house, he will be committing high treason, and so will you.
So you
can have your estate sequestered, you can even lose your life, and the priest will be taken off to the Tower of London, where they won't be as nice to him as you might imagine. And it'll end up with hanging, drawing, quartering. It's big stuff. It's really quite serious.
So they had to be hidden.
They had to be very, very careful about how they would hide the priests, and obviously they would adopt personas. They would generally be pretending to be the tutors of the children or something like that. So they go to great lengths. And this one was only discovered in the early 20th century. Mostly you don't know they're there until they're found during building repairs. Because obviously you've got to be careful how you do them.
But you were talking about somehow being able to communicate or feel you could with somebody in the past. But when you see that priest hole, you automatically then start thinking, poor things, to have to hide like that for your life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very much life and death then. And, reading around all the correspondence and how they block and check and how they hide, they're very careful not to divulge anything, obviously. But here and there are clues. Following the threads of the various people living here, not just in that context, but earlier and later, is part of the excitement. And finding early graffiti, people who have scratched their names into the walls. I mean, the house is full of clues. I mean, as I say, even in stones with old graffiti, or archaeologically in the garden, finding bits of pottery, bits of Venetian glass, musket balls from the Civil War.
I mean, I've come to see it, I think, as a great big memory box, almost. And it's our job to try and snatch these moments of history out of the ether, I think, and make sense of it all and try and see into that world. And here it's very easy to do that.
I mean, and this is real history.
This is
I was going to say
real,
it's
yes.
living history.
Yeah.
It sort of is living in the house, isn't
This
it?
is raw.
Yes.
This is raw, and it's earthy, and this is a glimpse of old Wales. I think that's what excites me so much. This is really it. And the house was a great centre of learning in the Renaissance period. So there was a wonderful library here. So all the great Welsh humanist scholars would come here to consult the library, and it was a great centre of poetry and literature and song, and some of the superstar bards came here to perform their poems to the family in the medieval period. So it's still got that sense.
Now, how do you know all this? Because you must have had to really excavate. You must have had to do real detective work to find out some of this.
Yes, and that's really been our job. We're constantly consulting the records. There are over 3,000 documents in the National Library of Wales, and they're all calendared. So we're consulting them all the time, and those papers have really informed the restoration of the house.
And topographical views as well, watercolours from the 18th century showing the ranges that have been pulled down. But as you say, mostly it's examining the building, examining the bits of the building that are no longer here, and examining the records of the people who lived here.
Yeah, but when you look at the pictures of the restoration, the very early pictures, I mean, like I said at the beginning, I can't even imagine why you took it on. Are you glad you did?
Yes, it's been... the challenges have been enormous, and there have been moments, as I was saying earlier, where we have a really close relationship with the house, and we listen very carefully to it. We really listen. I think
What does it say to you?
I like to think that we're kind of sensitive to its needs. We try and be sensitive to its needs. We try and be very, very, very humble, and I think in our response to the house, and let the house speak to us. And there have been moments when the challenges have seemed so massive and so great that we've stood in these halls and said, Gwydir, what do you want us to do? Tell us. You must tell us. And the answer always comes from somewhere. The answer always comes from somewhere. We have, infinite faith in the house's ability to lead us down the right avenue, I think. And
How does that manifest itself? Do you go to bed in despair and then wake up suddenly and think, That's how to do it.
Yes, so something will just happen. It's
Yeah.
usually how to solve a problem. I mean,
Yes, we're always problem solving, yeah.
it's crisis management. We call it crisis management usually. So there's always something, whether drains blocking or a chimney's, needs fixing, or there's water coming in somewhere. We're constantly sort of dealing with things like that.
But also in terms of the interpretation, that's a complex procedure, because one of the questions people will often ask me is this original? And that's obviously it's a difficult thing to answer, because we're sitting in a hall that originally didn't have this floor, so this floor isn't original. But this floor is probably about 1500, and the ceiling was probably inserted at the same time, about 1500. But the trusses above it are 100 years earlier or 80 years earlier, and that panelling is about 1570, and the plasterwork is about 1570. But these bricks are about 1820. But those bricks are about 1720. See what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a complicated, delicious archaeological mess. So what do you keep? What do you take away? Do we strip it back to the original? In which case, well, you've got to remove that ceiling. I mean, you've got to be obviously both pragmatic but also sensitive to every period. So we try and keep everything as far as we can as part of the accumulated evidence of the house. So you were talking earlier about these windows. Well, they're
The
put
windows are wonderful.
and some of them are 15th century, 16th. Those windows were actually enlarged and reglazed and put in about 1920. But they're part of the layering as well, and they're lovely windows. So do you know what I mean? It's a sort of juggling act, trying to respect everything really, and that doesn't mean that the 1970s fire extinguisher in the corner needs to stay there necessarily, but we do think it's important to record everything, photograph everything. If we're going to remove anything that is 20th century and is obviously out of frequency, we'll still record it.
It's a responsibility.
It is a responsibility.
I mean, you called it elegantly a challenge. I can imagine sometimes you've probably used stronger words than that.
Yes.
But it certainly is a responsibility, because you are taking something that you respect hugely as a part of history, and you are continuing its history, whereas it could have just been taken over by nature, couldn't it?
Well, yes, I suppose it could have.
So the next question is, where on earth did you get the money? This must cost a fortune.
Well, I have to say, and there is not a moment every day. We've been here for 30 years, and there isn't a day when I don't wake up and think, you're still here, how have you managed that? So it's a very difficult question to answer, that really. But again, it's going back to that feeling of the house sort of leading us, down the right path, and it's been like a vocation, really. It's like entering the priesthood.
Yes.
We have devoted ourselves to this thing, and remember, it's very different to what the National Trust are doing. There's a great, body of people behind what the Trust are doing. There's just the two of us trying to fund this.
As a consequence of that, obviously because we don't have a big pot of money, never have had,
No.
we've got nothing, because it all goes into the old girl. But you don't look at it and say, right, let's cost up how much it's going to cost to restore the solar tower, because that would be...
You wouldn't even start.
You
No.
wouldn't even begin like that.
No.
You've got to just think, right, we need to scaffold the south gable end, stabilise a lateral chimney which is teetering on the edge of falling down. You start with the obvious, start at the top, start with the chimneys, consolidate them one by one.
They are beautiful chimneys, aren't they?
They are.
I mean, they are
They are.
outstandingly Tudor, aren't they?
They're
those
very
chimneys?
Tudor, yeah.
And they give it a beautiful silhouette.
Yes.
And they're status symbols, obviously,
Yes.
and there were 13 of them. But obviously, there's no point in restoring the roofs before you've done the chimneys. So you do the chimneys first, and the roofs, and the
Is that the order, literally, that you
That's what we
started
did,
to work in?
Stabilise it. What is dangerous,
Yes.
you stabilise first. 2 of them had fallen in through the roofs anyway, and most of the tops were shedding crenellations and things. So we had to firstly stabilise those. So that's where we started, and then you start stripping the ivy and doing what you can, and then you look at the roofs, and section by section you do it, rather than just have one big programme of re-roofing.
No.
You couldn't possibly afford that. So the roofing took 10 years.
When
Became
you were
available.
able to mend the roof, which obviously protects it from the elements, did the house cheer up a bit?
Definitely, yes. I mean, the house now really knows it's loved, and we are very passionate about that. We do, we really love it, and I think it's kind of responding. It responds to that. I mean, it's just sort of come alive. You could feel it coming alive, and it's much warmer, and it's all that awfulness has been vanished in a way, really. And it's
even to the extent of it changing colour, because when we first came here, it was a dark, dark grey. All the stones were saturated. Everything, it was like a sponge that had just been, because although it had roofs, they were all leaking furiously and all the leads had gone. And so in many ways, it trapped a lot of the moisture in. So you have this thing that's just become a sponge. Once we re-roofed it, it took about 5 years, and gradually it started to change colour and go from a sort of dark dour grey to a sort of light buff grey. So the house itself was smiling. It started to cheer up, which was lovely to watch.
Yeah, and it does have a personality, clearly.
Very much
Tell
so.
me about William Randolph Hearst and the part he played in, well, at least a couple of the rooms.
Well, the dining room, an extraordinary event really in the restoration of the house, because when we arrived at Gwydir, we didn't even know that panelled room existed.
Well, because it wasn't a panelled room.
It wasn't
when
a
you
panelled
saw
room.
it.
It had completely gone. It was a wing that had been changed over the years, but it was no panelling, no fireplace, nothing. And shortly after we moved in, a local neighbour turned up with a sale catalogue, and it turned out there'd been a big sale here in 1921 when the house had belonged to Lord Carrington. He'd lost his son in the First World War, so he decided to sell everything, and the estate is sold, and it's just the house and the 10 acres of garden, which is what we've got today. So there is no big estate to support the house. It's just the 10 acres which we have now. And he went further and decided to sell 2 panelled rooms and a whole collection of wonderful furniture from the house. And
A lot of the furniture had been here since the 15th, 16th century, so it had never been sold, and was written up by all the important early oak, academics of the early 20th century. Percy McCoy, Avery Tipping. There were 2 Country Life articles in the early 20th century. It was important. So the sale of all this in 1921 attracted a lot of interest across the world, and it was a 2-day sale. And as you say, William Randolph Hearst snatched up a lot of the goodies.
So when you buy a room, when you're at Hearst, and you can afford to, you're buying a room, what you're doing is you're buying all of the beautiful panelling that would have been everywhere.
That sits against the wall, the wooden
Yes.
panelling that sits
Yeah.
against the wall. But in this case, it was a door case and a fireplace and a wonderful leather frieze which runs around the top of the room.
And he took it back with him to
And
America?
it was destined for San Simeon, or Hearst Castle, which was the castle he was building in California, of course, very famously. I mean, this was like an architectural detective hunt for us. And we contacted San Simeon and they said, no, we haven't got your room, but try the Metropolitan Museum in New York. We think they may have something of Gwydyr's. And this we did. And sure enough, they had our dining room. So we said, can we have it back, please?
Yeah. To which they must have said, well, no,
But they
it's
said,
ours.
well, no, they didn't. The room hadn't been on display. So I think they were,
I think
they were
a bit
amenable.
nonplussed initially, weren't they? Were these two weird characters from North Wales, bombarding them with letters and at the time faxes as well. And we were just full of enthusiasm, but probably a little bit cheeky. We think you might have our room. I don't suppose we can have it back. Never thinking for a moment they would say, well, let's put this to the trustees and see if we can deaccession it. And astonishingly, then it created a bit of a precedent actually for the release of important historic rooms. And it's started to happen in Britain as well, 1 or 2 cases. But I think this was the first time the New York Met had actually released a room that had been donated to them by Hearst in 1956 on his death. Brilliantly, he'd never used it. It had never gone to San Simeon. So it was still there in its packing cases, and the New York Metropolitan Museum hadn't erected it. It was in a storage depot in a big warehouse in the Bronx. So it was in its original 1921 packing cases, which is really exciting. And I don't know, we put a lot of rather naughty pressure on them, I think. And the curator of decorative fine art and fine arts, the splendid Bill Reeder, came over, and he spent a weekend with us. I think he wanted to make sure, A, that Gwydir existed, B, that we existed, and that we were serious.
Yeah.
I think it was his drive that it helped to basically seal that deal.
Bring it home.
And so, they deaccessioned it. We were slightly in despair as to how on earth we would fund this, because on the one hand, it's wonderful to have the promise of this room coming out. On the other hand, we thought, how are we going to do it?
How do you get it here?
So the HBC at the time gave us a grant to bring it back and to help install it, which was so amazing.
So was there a really exciting day where it arrived on the back of a lorry?
Yes,
Yeah.
literally, yes.
2 long, yeah.
Yes. The best part of it, I think, is being able to give it back, that bit of dignity. You know, this is what Gwydir
Wow,
once. This is what Gwydir once was.
Well, I mean, it looks magnificent now, but interestingly, there's another room which is still crying out for its panelling. What's the story behind the oak?
The oak parlour.
The oak
yes,
parlour.
yes. This is very much work in progress. This whole project is still happening. And this room, the second room, which William Randolph Hearst also bought, has eluded us now for 25 years, and we cannot find it. And we have searched the records, and it doesn't seem to appear in those records. But Hearst actually did assemble the oak parlour in his apartment in New York, which was called the Clarendon, said to be the largest apartment block in the world at the time. And we've got a picture of it, a photograph of it in 1929 in his library. And Hearst actually does. He went bankrupt a number of times, and during one of those bankruptcy sales, the Clarendon was sold and our panelling was taken out, and that's when we lose track of it. You know, where did it go when he sold the Clarendon? Did he sell it? Did he bequeath it to a museum? Do the family still have it?
It's extraordinary you can't trace that when you've done so well with so many other bits and pieces.
So we're putting it out there. Has anyone seen our room?
Exactly.
You know,
it might be in someone's garage. It's amazingly important 16th century linen fold panelling with a fireplace dated 1597 with Caesar, Julius Caesar or Augustus Caesar, and various other things, a wonderful carved ceiling. I mean, it's a really, really exciting, historically sexy ensemble, and it's so much part of Gwydir, and it's got to be out there somewhere.
And if you go in that room now, it's just bare walls, which are beautiful actually in themselves. The stone is brilliant, but you can see how it's crying out for its panelling.
Yes, and we're waiting. We're waiting for Gwydir just to give us that last key that will go into the lock, that we can unlock this puzzle, because it's a mystery. Where did it go? Whole rooms don't just disappear.
We've been
it's
down
out there somewhere.
So many different wormholes. We've tried so many different connections. We've been introduced to people who know something, and then in the end they don't. It
doesn't lead anywhere.
And there's been a lot of disappointment, but it's still, we're still buoyant. Morale is still high, because we think it's
somebody must know.
Yes.
Somebody somewhere knows.
And it will happen.
Yeah.
We have to believe that.
Deo volente,
Yes.
or
Gwydir says so.
as Gwydir wills it.
Is Gwydir
It's the old girl.
Yes.
It's the old girl.
It's a very martial, very sort of masculine-looking thing, but actually, she's an old girl, really.
Yeah, okay, she's an old girl. What about old girls, old men, who perhaps haunt the place? Because whether you like it or not, you are down as being one of the most haunted places in Britain. Who are the ghosts
There are
here?
many different things here. We all rub along together.
Seriously, I mean,
We do.
Do you believe there is something going on?
Yes. I think, when you, until you have experiences, we're all kind of, we live in an age of scientific rationalism, so obviously everything can be explained. The problem is when you run out of explanations and nothing can go in comfortably into that tight box of science, it becomes metaphysical, obviously. And there are metaphysical dimensions here which we don't understand, and in many houses of this age and complexity there are layers and layers, and like a crystal set, there are atmospheres and frequencies and memories that you can't disperse. Somehow, and we don't fully understand it, there are weird things that happen. And I think beyond that, we can't really...
I think certainly when we moved in 94, we were really tested. I mean, many strange things happened here. And they do say, I think, that when you start a big restoration project like this, for example, you can disturb I don't know what to call it, the energies, the sort of spiritual energies of the house, perhaps. I don't know, but it did change our perception a little bit. And there are so many old stories connected to the house, stories that have been told since the 18th century. And we have a ghost room, and lots of stories sort of relating to old Sir John Wynne, for example, there, who's said to haunt the house.
Now when was he, Sir John Wynne?
Late 16th century.
1553.
Was he the one who was
born
involved
here
in the gunpowder
1553.
plot, perhaps?
He was the one who knew about it. He would deny having had any involvement.
Yeah, okay, yes. Yeah. Allegedly, then.
Allegedly, yes, it's a very good word.
Yeah. So, but do you ever actually see anything yourself? Or is it just an experience?
Yes, I mean, there are those who say that ghosts live within us, and it depends on, you have to be, we're very sensitive to those, certain people are sensitive to those happenings that have taken place in a house, and perhaps when you have a strong emotional charge, that can be absorbed into the fabric of a building. I mean, I don't, there are so many theories and
I think
and
it's
thoughts
tuning
about
in,
these
though, isn't
things.
it? As you say, sometimes you are a receiver. Some people are receivers, and perhaps they don't know it. And when the tuning is right, they will suddenly release something, whether it's within them or whether it's within. I mean, we don't know enough about it. I mean, it's too.
It's too much to take on. You've taken on
Yes,
enough.
and I think we now, we certainly keep a very open mind about all of that. And we're very respectful of that.
And there
but have never wanted to exercise the house and never done that,
No,
because we
we're
don't
really-
want to disturb
What's
here. We live harmoniously now.
Yes.
We I think we've earned our stripes.
I know when
If I can put it like that.
I know when she's in the ghost corridor. I mean, I come down from the studio down the spiral stair. I just sort of work my way through in the dark, and occasionally I do sort of go through. I feel it's extraordinary, and I know she's there. I mean, it sounds a bit weird, but I don't know.
No, I don't think
just,
it does. I think you're just acknowledging that there may be something
There's something going on, and
in the fabric of the house.
and you tangibly feel it. And after all, they've got seniority. They've been here a lot longer than we have. We're the new boys on the block. And so it's not for us to start dictating what happens here and exercising them or whatever. They're here for a reason. We don't know what that reason is. We don't fully understand it. Live and let live, or live and let die. Was that a bit too James Bond?
Well, yes, there's a reason. Actually, to come crash bang back into the present day, you've got a new problem that hasn't affected Gwydir Castle before, and that's flooding. But it's a really important problem for you. Can you explain why? Because, I mean, historically, this place hasn't been affected by flooding before.
No, because it was always protected by very high embankments. Over the years when the estate was sold, the fields that the embankments now stand on were allowed to break down and they weren't repaired. And so Gwydir now floods in a way that it never once flooded. And
Well,
that's,
also,
that's
that-
creating a real problem for
It
us
is creating a
here.
problem. Also, the traditional floodplain was to the north of the Conway Valley, and that's been eroded and encroached upon and pushed back, and hard defences and
Well, that's the trouble with
drainage
flooding,
of the
isn't it?
uplands.
With rivers and if they do any defensive work further upstream, it affects you.
Yeah.
And this is now affecting you. How much of a problem is it?
Oh, I mean, we can have 8 to 9 foot of water in the cellars. The gardens, which are also listed Grade 1, can flood 6, 7, 8 times a year.
So when a building like this and the gardens, if they're listed Grade 1, that puts them at the very top of a priority for the local environment to help
Yes.
save.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why isn't anyone helping you here?
Very good question. It's a very contentious issue, and it's one of our battles. That's what we battle with the Welsh Government, trying to get some flood protection to
I mean, at one
to
point you
protect the
were
house.
promised, and they appeared to renege on
That's right.
the promise.
Yeah.
Well, they promised
Yeah.
in 2000 to put a flood defence wall around, and then foot and mouth happened and various other things, and then it always, the ball gets kicked off into the long grass repeatedly, and you get new generations of people running the Environment Agency or whoever it might be. And we've had endless meetings with endless rooms full of suits, and it just becomes it grinds you down, really, because all we're trying to do is do our bit to help to preserve the historic built environment, which includes these important gardens. And we have 82 tree preservation orders, individual trees that have TPOs, 82 of them, as well as it being Grade 1 listed. And we have had to see 12 of those go. They die. And we've had to take them out. This is the most difficult thing we find, the lack of support on this issue, because there's only a certain amount we can do.
Well, that's
And
the
it becomes a
point.
political issue.
What can you do? I mean, it's going to be very expensive to try and build
Yes,
your own
well,
flood
we could,
defences.
and we with the help of an incredible team of volunteers who came for 2 years. We built our own flood wall, which we filled 45,000 sandbags with sand and cement, and physically just manhandled them into place. It took 2 years, and every week these amazing people would come and help us, and it was so very moving, to us, that local people cared so much about Gwydir that they were willing to turn up in rain or shine and fill those sandbags, and that's helped enormously. We have reduced the floodwaters by about 4 or 5 feet, but we still, water will find its way, and it's coming under the bank, and so there is more work for us to be done, and that's for us to do. and that's going to need another, big tranche of money to.
Are you scared that if you're not careful and if you can't do something about it, it's going to sort of completely undermine all the work you've already put into this place?
Certainly, the garden, certainly, yes, and that's the big, the big worry. And I think the constant wetting and drying of the house is, we are having problems.
Yes, and
we are having problems.
in the Hall of Justice, we had to underpin the cellars below the cellar walls because the amount of erosion and washing out meant that there was structural damage.
And let's face it, it's not a problem that's going to get
aspect.
better in this
No.
in this climate.
No, it's not.
And when the cellar's filled with water, it comes very close to the underside of the panelled room that's just been returned.
So is there any sort of fund you can set up or anything like that?
Well, we have got a GoFundMe page, and people have been incredibly generous to help with the flooding. So, that's
yet another thing to
where-
wish you best of luck with. Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, because this place is amazing, and Wales should be thanking you. I hope they are, because this is heritage stuff, isn't it?
It's lovely to share it with like-minded people
Yes.
who appreciate what they're looking at and who are as passionate as we are, as you are. Thank you,
Yes.
Anne.
Thank you for that support.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.